At 3:17 Standard Galactic Time, every major communications array across known space blinked at once. Not flickered. Not glitched. Blink. Synchronize. Silence, asterisk asterisk. A message appeared, burned into every secured channel, every military frequency, every civilian relay from the core worlds to the outer rim. It carried no encryption signature, no diplomatic clearance codes, no origin stamp that any known species could identify. It simply arrived, as if the galaxy itself had spoken through a single fractured breath. The message contained 6 words. Did you rescue a human? For half a second, there was nothing. No response protocols triggered. No analysts spoke. No admirals issued commands. Even automated defense systems hesitated, something so rare it would later be recorded as a system-wide anomaly across 17 civilizations. Then the silence broke. Across star systems orbiting dying suns and newborn nebulae, alarms began to rise. Not from one empire, but from many. The Jacquerie shifted their fleet formations without command authorization. The Virelian Trade Synod froze all commercial lanes in the Orion Spur. The Keth Dominion activated long-decommissioned war relays buried beneath their capital moon. Entire species that had not mobilized in centuries suddenly turned their gaze toward a single coordinate grid, the outer veil expanse. No one explained why. No one needed to. Because every admiral, every intelligence officer, every ancient war AI that still remembered classified history protocols recognized the pattern behind the words. Human involvement. And worse, uncertainty. On the bridge of the CSS Relent Horizon, Commander Savarel stood motionless as the message repeated across her tactical display. The ship's lighting dimmed automatically, reacting to the sudden spike in gravitational stress signatures nearby, fleet formations adjusting faster than physics should allow. Her officers waited for her to speak, but she couldn't. Not immediately. Because in 27 years of service patrolling the fringe territories, she had learned one rule the galaxy never dared to write down. When humans are mentioned, everything changes. A junior analyst finally whispered what everyone was thinking. Is it a threat? A warning? Or a demand? Savarel's eyes narrowed at the blinking words. Did you rescue a human? It wasn't the question itself that chilled her. It was the implication hidden beneath it. Somewhere, something valuable enough to trigger cross-species military synchronization had been taken, lost, or protected. And the galaxy, cold, calculating, ancient in its fear of human unpredictability, was not asking what happened. It was asking who was responsible. Far beyond the edge of mapped space, unmanned listening stations began transmitting emergency priority bursts. Civilian ships were ordered into silent drift. Entire sectors went dark, not destroyed, but deliberately muted, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And in that suffocating stillness, one truth spread faster than light itself. A human was involved. And whatever had happened to them, the galaxy was about to respond. Captain Vera Sol had flown through some of the most forgotten corridors of known space, but nothing compared to the Veil Expanse. It wasn't just a region, it was a scar in the galaxy. Space itself seemed different here, as if reality had been stretched too thin and never fully repaired. Nebula clouds bled across the void in slow-moving crimson and violet currents, illuminating fractured asteroid fields that drifted like the bones of dead worlds. Ancient wreckage, some human, most not, floated silently between gravity wells that bent light into unnatural spirals. Navigation systems didn't fail in the Veil Expanse, they hesitated, as if even machines questioned whether they should continue. Vera's ship, the Ardent Lark, was a mid-range freighter built for endurance rather than elegance. Its hull bore the scars of 100 minor collisions and one major engagement she never spoke about. Inside, the corridors hummed with aging life support systems and the faint metallic scent of recycled air. Consoles flickered with patched-together interfaces, and emergency lighting cast everything in a muted amber glow, like the ship was permanently stuck between safety and disaster. She had learned to trust the Lark the way one trusts a tired companion, imperfect, but loyal. Vera herself sat in the cockpit, hands steady on the controls, eyes scanning the endless drift ahead. Her species had long abandoned frontier routes like this, calling them suicide lanes. But contracts didn't care about comfort zones. Medical supplies had to reach the rim colonies, even if the galaxy preferred to forget they existed. She adjusted a course correction, watching gravitational distortions ripple across her display. "Stay steady," she murmured, not to the ship, but to herself. In the silence of deep space, voices were easy anchors. That was when the anomaly appeared. At first, it registered as debris. A standard escape signature, low power, erratic drift, barely alive. Most captains would have flagged it for later review. Some would have ignored it entirely. Salvage in the Veil expanse was a gamble few survived twice. But something made her pause. The signal pattern wasn't civilian. It wasn't pirate. And it wasn't any known military registry she had ever encountered. It was wrong. Not corrupted, just unfamiliar in a way that made her instincts tighten. Against protocol. Against common sense. Against every survival instinct honed by years of running dangerous routes, Vera altered course. The ardent Lark descended through drifting fields of shattered ice rock, its hull trembling as micro-collisions struck the shields. The escape pod came into view like a dying star, spinning slowly, scorched black along one side, its emergency beacon flickering in irregular pulses. Whoever had designed it had expected either rescue within hours, or none at all. "Life signs?" she asked quietly. The ship's AI hesitated before answering. "Minimal. Critical condition. Non-native physiology detected." Non-native. That single phrase tightened something in her chest. As the freighter closed in, she saw movement inside the pod's fractured viewport. A hand. Weak. Trembling. Pressed against the glass from within. Vera didn't wait for permission. She initiated retrieval. The docking clamps extended like skeletal fingers, locking onto the pod as stabilizers fought against the expanse's chaotic currents. Alarms chirped. Systems protested. Somewhere deep in the ship's core, a warning flagged the decision as high-risk interference with unknown entity survival protocol. She ignored it. When the outer hatch finally opened, the first thing she felt was the cold, an unnatural, deep space chill that seemed to carry weight rather than temperature. And then she saw him. Human. Barely conscious. Armor cracked. Blood suspended in microgravity like dark constellations around his body. His breathing was shallow, uneven, as if each inhale was a negotiation with death itself. Vera froze. She had seen images before, of course. Every spacer had. Humans were rare, dangerous, politically volatile. Stories about them varied depending on who told them. Some called them protectors, others called them disasters waiting to happen. But none of those stories prepared her for how fragile this one looked. He wasn't a legend. He wasn't a threat. He was just dying. And for reasons she didn't yet understand, Captain Vera Sol reached out her hand and pulled a human out of the dark. 3 days. That's how long it took for the silence to turn into a storm. The ardent Lark drifted deeper into the Veil expanse, its engines running in low-power stealth mode. Vera had rerouted every non-essential system to keep life support stable for the humans she had pulled from the escape pod. He lay in the medical bay beneath flickering diagnostic lights, suspended in a recovery field that hissed softly with each pulse of stabilizing nanofluid. His condition wasn't improving fast enough. Not for her comfort. And not for whatever unknown forces were now beginning to circle them. At first, it was subtle. A distortion in long-range sensors. A faint gravitational ripple that didn't belong to any natural phenomenon. Then came the communication blackout, entire frequency bands vanishing one by one, as if something was swallowing signals before they could escape the ship. Vera stood on the bridge, staring at the empty starfield ahead. Any incoming traffic? The AI hesitated. None registered. However, anomalous vector signatures detected. Multiple. Converging. Her fingers tightened around the console edge. Define multiple. A pause. Longer than she liked. 17. Possibly more. Origin unknown. Trajectory, intercept course. The words didn't make sense at first. 17 ships didn't simply appear in the Veil expanse. Nothing traveled in groups this deep in contested space unless it was a war fleet, or something pretending to be one. Vera activated external sensors. The display expanded across the bridge in cold holographic detail. And there they were. Shapes forming out of darkness. Not appearing all at once, but emerging slowly, deliberately, as if space itself was revealing them in pieces. Warships. Sleek, asymmetrical designs bearing no recognized registry. Their hulls were layered with shifting energy lattices that bent light around them, making their true size impossible to judge. Pirates. But not ordinary ones. These ships were coordinated. Professional. Military-grade discipline in formation spacing. Whoever they were, they had learned how to kill efficiently, and repeatedly. A transmission cracked through her comms without warning. Unregistered vessel, a voice said, calm and sharp as a blade. You are transporting an unauthorized biological asset. Return it immediately. You will not be asked again. Vera glanced toward the medical bay camera feed. The human. Still unconscious. Still breathing, barely. Her instincts told her to comply. To detach the cargo. To survive. That was what any rational captain would do in the Veil expanse. But something about the request felt wrong. Not legal wrong. Not political wrong. Personal wrong. Identity, she responded. Silence. Then laughter, low, controlled, and disturbingly close, despite the distance between ships. You have no clearance for that information. The first warning shot struck her shields less than a second later. The ardent lark shuddered violently, alarms screaming through the corridor systems. Vera was thrown against her console as the ship lurched sideways, stabilizers fighting to keep them from spiraling into debris fields. Shields at 60%, the AI warned. Hull integrity compromised. Recommendation, surrender cargo and initiate escape vector. Vera wiped blood from a cut on her brow, eyes locked on the tactical display. Outside, the warships tightened their formation. Not rushing. Not chaotic. Patient. Like predators closing a circle that had already been drawn. A second transmission arrived. This is your final warning. And then, quietly, almost casually, as if it were the most obvious conclusion in the universe. You do not understand what you are protecting. The words landed heavier than the weapon's fire. Vera's gaze flickered again to the medical bay feed. The human's fingers twitched. Barely visible. But alive. And for the first time since she had pulled him from the void, she realized something terrifying. They hadn't come for cargo. They hadn't come for a prisoner. They had come because whatever was in her ship was worth starting a war over. The first truth arrived not as a message, but as a breach in reality itself. Every screen aboard the Ardent Lark flickered white at once. Not a system failure, something far more deliberate. A synchronized override that cut through firewall layers designed to resist Empire-grade cyber warfare. Vera staggered back from the console as the bridge lights dimmed into emergency crimson, casting everything in the glow of warning and inevitability. Then the identity seal broke. A classified data stream forced itself open across her display, encrypted so deeply it felt less like information being transmitted and more like something being unburied. Military archives. Cross-species intelligence files. Recognition protocols that dated back long before her captaincy, before her fleet, before even the current political age of the galaxy. And at the center of it all, a single designation. Human Prime Clearance, Command Authority Level 7. Vera's breath caught. That level didn't exist in civilian records. It barely existed in military records. Level 7 meant direct linkage to planetary defense command structures, species leadership tier access. Only sovereign-level assets or existential threats were ever assigned such clearance. Her eyes scanned further. Name, Elias Ward. Status, missing. Active recovery protocol engaged, ****. Classification, diplomatic core/strategic deterrence asset. Asset, she whispered, the word tasting wrong in her mouth. A soft chime echoed through the bridge. Not from her systems. From outside. The nearest warship had opened another channel, but this one wasn't directed at her. It was directed at Earth. And Earth had answered. The space ahead of her ship fractured with light. Not a jump signature. Not a hyperspace transition. Something older. More controlled. More absolute. A fleet emerged. Not 17 ships this time. Not even 100. Thousands. They didn't appear randomly, they assembled into existence like a structure being completed mid-reality. Formation grids locked into place within milliseconds. Carrier vessels unfolded massive armored bays like waking giants. Drone swarms ignited in synchronized pulses, illuminating the darkness with cold blue fire. And at their center, something that made Vera forget how to breathe. A command vessel the size of a small moon. Its hull bore no insignia of empire or alliance. Only a simple emblem repeated across its surface. A stylized Earth. Encircled by intersecting orbital lines. The comms channel opened again, but this time the voice was different. Calm. Controlled. Human. Unidentified hostiles, the voice said, carrying across space with unsettling clarity. You are interfering with a protected diplomatic asset. A pause. Then, colder. Stand down. Or be removed. The pirate warships hesitated. For the first time. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. Vera felt her stomach tighten as fragmented intelligence packets continued flooding her display. Classified human military doctrine. Restricted first contact protocols. Historical engagement logs marked with symbols she didn't understand, but instinctively feared. One line repeated itself across multiple files. Human diplomatic personnel are to be treated as strategic equivalents to sovereign extinction events. Her mind struggled to process it. A diplomat. A diplomat. Not a soldier. Not a warship commander. Something worse. The human in her medical bay shifted again, stronger this time. His vitals spiked as if reacting to the presence outside the ship, like a signal being answered. Vera turned slowly toward the corridor leading down to him. Her voice barely worked. Who are you? And in that moment, the galaxy answered for him. Because every pirate vessel in range suddenly received the same transmission. Not from Earth. Not from the fleet. From a single, authorized human command signature embedded deep in galactic defense networks. A kill switch protocol activating. The message was only 3 words long. He is ours. And every weapon in the system quietly armed itself. The galaxy did not witness the arrival of humanity's fleet. It endured it. Space itself seemed to buckle as the first wave transitioned into real space, no dramatic flash, no ceremonial warning, just an instantaneous tearing of darkness into order. Warships emerged like blades being drawn from an invisible sheath, each one locking into formation before its sensors even fully synchronized with local physics. Then came the second wave. And the third. And then the sky was no longer empty, it was structured, occupied, controlled. Human naval doctrine did not believe in gradual escalation. It believed in overwhelming certainty. Every ship arrived already knowing its role, its target set, its firing solution pre-calculated across thousands of contingency branches. The pirate formation that had once felt intimidating now looked like scattered debris drifting toward a storm they could not comprehend. On the Ardent Lark, Captain Vera Sol stood frozen at the viewport, watching the impossible unfold. Her sensors struggled to keep up, displaying more data than they were designed to process. Gravitational spikes. Fleet-wide synchronization pulses. Weapons arrays charging in harmonic sequence, like an orchestra tuning itself for a final, irreversible note. And then she saw it. The scale. Thousands of human warships. Not just military vessels, carriers, interceptors, heavy dreadnoughts, but support wings, recovery platforms, civilian evac contingencies woven into the battle grid. Humanity didn't send an army. It sent a system. A voice broke through all channels simultaneously. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just final. All hostile vessels, it said. You are engaged in the unlawful detention and endangerment of a protected human diplomatic asset. A pause. It almost sounded tired. You have 10 seconds to surrender. Vera's breath caught. 10 seconds was not negotiation. It was ritual. The pirate fleet responded exactly as expected, panic disguised as aggression. Weapons fired first, a chaotic burst of plasma and rail-driven munitions that lit the void in jagged streaks of light. For a fraction of a moment, it seemed like resistance might matter. Then humanity answered. The human fleet did not dodge. It did not retreat. It corrected. Point defense systems erased incoming fire mid-trajectory. Interceptors moved like thoughts rather than machines, slipping between debris paths that shouldn't have been predictable. Entire pirate volleys vanished before impact, dissolved into silent fragments of superheated dust. And then the counterstrike began. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't theatrical. It was precise. Railgun lances cut through engines at the exact structural weak points. Electronic warfare pulses shut down entire ship clusters mid-maneuver. Boarding pods launched not to conquer indiscriminately, but to extract, disable, and neutralize with terrifying efficiency. But the most frightening part wasn't the destruction. It was the focus. Every human ship had one priority thread running through its command matrix. Locate Commander Elias Ward. Protect Captain Vera Sol, ****. On the pirate flagship, alarms screamed as their systems collapsed one by one. Their leader attempted a retreat vector, only to find every escape route already sealed by overlapping human formations. A transmission reached them. Direct. Unencrypted. Human. "This is Earth Response Command," the voice said quietly. "You made a mistake involving one of ours." Then, softer, almost regretful. "And now you will learn why that was your last mistake." On Vera's ship, the medical bay doors hissed open behind her. She turned. The human stood there. Barely stable. Weak. Alive. His eyes, however, were no longer lost. They were aware. And as he looked at the storm of human warships surrounding them, the smallest trace of something like recognition passed across his face. Not fear. Not surprise. But confirmation. As if he had expected this all along. Outside, the galaxy burned quietly under human protection. The war ended the way most galactic wars did not. Not with treaties. Not with negotiations. But with silence that felt almost sacred. One by one, the pirate fleet ceased firing. Some attempted escape, only to find human interceptors already waiting along every calculated vector. Others surrendered mid-engagement when their systems abruptly shut down under overwhelming electronic control. A few simply stopped existing in tactical records, erased from the battlefield map with surgical precision that left no ambiguity about who now controlled the expanse. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm stopped. Space settled. The Veil expanse, once a graveyard of forgotten ships and predatory empires, became still, held in the quiet grip of human naval dominance. Human vessels remained in formation long after the last hostile signal faded, not celebrating, not retreating, but watching. Guarding. Waiting. On the ardent Lark, emergency lighting softened into a steady calm glow. The ship's hull, battered and scarred, slowly stabilized under external repair drones that moved with eerie coordination, stitching ruptured plating back into place as if time itself was being reversed. Captain Vera Sol stood in the corridor outside the medical bay, her hands still trembling faintly. She had survived battles before. She had outrun pirates, navigated collapsing star lanes, and stared into engine failures that should have killed her a dozen times over. But nothing had ever felt like this. Not survival. Something larger. Something irreversible. The door slid open behind her. Commander Elias Ward stepped out. He was no longer the broken figure she had pulled from the escape pod. Stabilization fields had restored him enough to stand on his own, though faint traces of exhaustion still lingered in his posture. His gaze moved briefly toward the viewport, where human warships hung in the darkness like an unblinking constellation of steel. Then he looked at her. Not as an asset. Not as a witness. But as a person. "You didn't have to do it," he said quietly. Vera let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding for days. "I know." A pause stretched between them, heavy with everything that had almost ended differently. The pirates. The fleet. The transmission that had shaken civilizations awake. The truth she still didn't fully understand about the man standing in front of her. Outside, a human battleship rotated slightly, its massive silhouette eclipsing distant stars. For a moment, Vera realized something unsettling. Those ships weren't just guarding space. They were guarding her. A soft chime echoed through the ship's comm system. Earth. Every speaker aboard the Ardent Lark activated at once, filling corridors, bridges, and compartments with a single unified transmission. The voice was calm again, controlled, almost gentle, but beneath it lay something vast. Something ancient in its certainty. "Captain Vera Sol," it said. A pause. Then, unmistakably deliberate. "You are now under Earth protection status." Another pause. And finally, "Stand by for retrieval." Vera closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Not fear. Not triumph. Something quieter. Stranger. The feeling of a life-changing direction without permission. When she opened them again, she looked at Elias. "What happens now?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched the human fleet through the viewport, as if measuring a future already in motion. Then, softly. "Now, they decide the galaxy remembers your name." Outside, the stars burned steadily in human-controlled silence. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, the universe did not wonder who held power. It wondered who had just been chosen.